After 15 years in a cage, a lion is eventually freed and sent to a refuge. When he goes out of his cage, something incredible occurs, and no one can predict how he will respond when he feels grass for the first time in his life. The cage door was raised, and a little wind was blowing. Reuben would be adjusting to a completely different way of life, and nobody knew how he would respond. Everyone appeared to hold their breath as a weary-looking face emerged at the cage's entrance. On the plus side, this was a significant occasion for Reuben and the Animal Defenders International team. A massive paw eventually emerged from the cage and cautiously down into the grass after a few apprehensive minutes. Looking down, Reuben was perplexed by what he felt under his paw. For the first time in his life, he felt grass, and he wasn't sure how to react to it. His uncertainty broke the hearts of the workers. At 15 years old, Reuben had never experienced freedom, despite the fact that he should never have been forced to live in the woods. He had grown up at a private zoo in Armenia for the first 10 years of his life. His cage was small and empty, but at least he could see some of the other creatures housed in cages as well as the daily visitors. Life at the zoo wasn't too bad. Reuben used to find people really intriguing when he was younger. He had nothing else in his cage to occupy his mind, so the steady stream of people walking by kept him semi-occupied. However, fewer people had been visiting in recent years, and things were changing. The zoo's animal population had decreased, and eventually its proprietors made the decision to close it down completely. Reuben was by far the largest animal at the zoo. All the other animals were rather little. As the other animals were transported out of the facility and placed into other crates or cages, he lay in his cage and watched. With the exception of one lion, the zoo was deserted at day's end. Reuben waited for someone to come get him, leaning against the bars of his cage. He was without toys, food, drink, or a comfortable place to rest. He was alone with the cold, hard concrete floor and the metal bars of his prison. Reuben waited for someone to return to the zoo for several weeks, but after a year passed, he was still alone. By this point, the lion's tragic tale had spread across the neighborhood, and a few kind animal lovers had decided to bring food to the lion in order to save him from starvation. The authorities didn't appear interested in finding a solution, and nobody knew what to do with him. When the zoo had been open, Reuben had frequently been heard howling, but he had now stopped. He had given up hope after yelling for so long without receiving any response. Reuben's life became incredibly lonely without someone with whom to interact. The winters in Armenia were harsh, and the lion would frequently become quite cold if it had no refuge. That's how 5 full years went by. Despite receiving regular food, his quality of life was non-existent. His eyes were always gloomy, his fur had matted and grown dull, and he had completely given up on life. Reuben was 15 years old by this point, and the people around him started to fear that his days were numbered. Nobody desired for the unfortunate lion to perish. Such loneliness and sadness. Even though Reuben had been alive for 15 years, he had never really lived. Such a lovely creature has no place living a lonely life in prison. However, Reuben was finally experiencing some good fortune. The news of the lone lion had now reached beyond Armenia, and Animal Defenders International, an organization devoted to preserving wild animals in their natural habitats as well as captive animals, had become aware of the tragic tragedy. The team realized they had to intervene and attempt to save Reuben. To evaluate the issue, they put together a small team and flew to Armenia. Upon arriving to the deserted zoo, employees of Animal Defenders International were astounded by what they saw. Reuben had a little cage. The stunning large cat had lived in the same location his entire life. He had never felt the grass beneath his paws. He had never been able to fully gaze up at the sky, and he had never had any toys, food, or activities to keep him occupied. Reuben probably has never seen another lion in his entire life. Even worse, he had been by himself for the previous 5 years. Everyone was aware that an immediate action was required. Locals who had been there for a long told the crew that Reuben was born at the zoo, but that he was taken away from his family right away. He had never played with a brother, experienced maternal love, or enjoyed the companionship of a pride. His life experiences had reached a standstill. They noticed Reuben hunched in a corner as they got closer to the cage. As they got closer, he didn't even bother to look up. He had obviously given up. Reuben was considered an older lion in captivity at the age of 15. A lion's lifetime is 20 years on average, but that's when they get to live in a huge, appropriate cage, socialize with other lions, and eat healthy food. That was something Reuben had never had. It was clear to all of them on the squad that they wanted Reuben to have a final taste of independence. Their only task from now on was to rescue him from the deserted zoo. Without much delay, the Animal Defenders International staff made inquiries and made arrangements to offer Reuben a completely new life. After contacting a number of airlines and wildlife sanctuaries, it was determined that a wildlife refuge in South Africa would be the most suitable location for him. At his age, putting him back into the wild was no longer a possibility because he had spent his whole existence in captivity. However, the refuge was a much better option than what he had previously had. Finding an airline in Armenia that will carry the lion proved to be difficult for the crew. Just when he thought things were getting better, there was one more roadblock. Ultimately, Reuben's safe transportation to his new home was supplied by Qatar Airways Cargo, who joined forces with the organization. The group was really appreciative of the airline's assistance. Their next worry was going to be how to get the lion on such a lengthy journey. They concluded that the best course of action was to construct a safe box and coat it in white paint to maximize solar reflection. To help Reuben have the most peaceful travel possible, the team sprayed lavender and feline-friendly hormone inside the box. Of course, the lion would also need to be put under sedation, but the crew wanted to ensure that everything went as smoothly as possible. They didn't want Reuben's trauma to worsen. Reuben was easily and successfully placed into his container on the day of the trip by the team. It felt that the combination of lavender and feline away worked. They had the impression that Reuben could sense their efforts to assist him and that things were going to get better. For the squad, things were a little bit different.